What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video we're going to be taking a deep dive from a betting perspective into each of the main card fights taking place this weekend at UFC 302, and a little bit later on in this video I've got what I think is a really solid bet to share with you. And speaking of solid bets, I want to say a big shout out to Angela Hill, who came through for us in a big way on the last card. However, I think the betting sites are something are trying to silence me, because this video where you can see from the title I'm betting on Angela Hill, it was removed from YouTube. It was copyright flagged like last week, so it's disappeared. You can see I've got this copyright strike, which is pretty annoying. So yeah, big shout out to Angela Hill for coming through for us last week. It's a bit of a shame because I didn't get many views on last week's video, because obviously it wasn't the most popular card. I usually get, as you can see, more views than that, so a lot of you probably would have missed the bet on Angela Hill, but she did come through for us in a big way. But don't worry, hopefully we can earn some decent profits with a bet this week. Like I say, I'll be getting into what I think is a pretty good bet shortly on some of these fights coming up. Also, I did post a video earlier on today with a decent bet in the Europa Conference League final game tomorrow night, which will be Wednesday, May the 29th, between Olympiacos and Fiorentina. So check out that video. Again, hasn't had many views because anything UFC related doesn't really get many views on my channel, but I do think that's an even more solid bet on that football match tomorrow than what I'm going to be sharing in this video. So check it out, and if you want me to drop more football content, then yeah, hit the like button on that video. Subscribe if you haven't already. I was actually checking my prop bet performance on like my World Cup video, on the Champions League video I dropped 8 months ago, and also the World Cup video that I dropped, where is it, if we keep scrolling down here, a year ago. So I was looking back through the prop bets that I recommended in this video, and you would have made around 12.83 units of prop betting units if you would have tailed all the props that I recommended in this video. We recommended Kylian Mbappe to finish top goal scorer in the World Cup, and he did, so that was like a 10.0 plus 900 winner, as well as a bunch of other stuff. And then in the Champions League betting tips video, we're currently only up like 0.43 units from the bets recommended in this video. However, I did recommend a bet in this video on Real Madrid to win the Champions League at odds of 9.0 plus 800, and they are obviously playing in the final this Saturday against Borussia Dortmund. So we made 12.83 units on the props in the World Cup video. We made potentially 8.43 if Real Madrid win the game this weekend, which I think they will. If not, we'll be like minus 0.5 units on the Champions League, but I think Real Madrid are going to get the job done. And then in the Europa League prop bets, we lost about 5 units. So no matter what happens with Real Madrid on Saturday, we'll still be up overall on these props that I've recommended in these videos. But if Real Madrid do beat Borussia Dortmund on Saturday night, we'll be up on these props a lot across the Europa League, Champions League and World Cup. So if you'd like me to do videos like that for the Euros and the Copa America, which both start in June, let me know and we'll get them done. But yeah, check out the video between for the bet for the Fiorentina Olympiacos game right by there. And also, don't forget, my bread and butter, the thing I do best, is live betting on the UFC. We make a profit on approximately 70% of UFC events in live betting. We've made a profit on 9 of the last 11 UFC events. So we're on a very good run in UFC live betting over the last couple months. So could be about to hit another very nice upswing, like you see us hit, you know, every once in a while. Go on these nice big winning runs. I think we're in the middle of one now. So yeah, check out my live betting service. I'll leave a link for it in the description below. I think you'll like it a lot. And also, if you sign up for my live betting service, you get access to all my breakdown videos for every single UFC fight on every single UFC card. Because in this YouTube video, we're only getting time to break down the main card fight, so this video would be like 2-3 hours long. Alright, let's kick things off by breaking down the main event on this card, which is a fight between Islam Makhachev and Dustin Poirier. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Makhachev's odds have been consistently declining over the last few weeks. So I'll just hit refresh to make sure we've got the latest odds. So the latest odds are about 1.16, which is going to be minus 625 for an implied probability of 86%. So a while ago, sometime last week, it might have even been before last week, I can't exactly remember, it's been a while though. A while ago, I did recommend a bet on this card, which you can see down the bottom here. There is a 2-fight parlay accumulator with Islam Makhachev and Jailton Almeida. Now, the odds have declined since I posted this bet in my Discord. So I don't know what the odds would be now. Let me just check and I can let you know if I would still recommend placing this bet. So the average odds would be 1.16 and the average odds on Almeida are going to be, say, 1.36. They've dipped down to 1.58, which would be minus 172. So the odds have declined a fair amount. The odds have declined a fair amount. The odds have declined by about 10%, but 10-15%, but I still think this bet is very likely to hit. So the odds have declined a bit since I recommended it, but if you haven't bet it yet, it's probably still worth a go, to be fair. I don't tend to bet too much on on parlays, accumulators, things like that. So keep it at 1 unit, keep it small. But hopefully we can bank a winner, because as you can see, we are doing pretty fucking good on the old pre-fight bets lately. We hit a winner on Ribovic, Buckley, Woodson, Carlos Diego Ferreira, my biggest underdog win of a long time, and the over 1.5 rounds on Despania versus Cortez Costa. And then we hit the winner on Hill last week. So we're doing well on pre-fight bets at the moment. Hopefully we can keep it going with another win this week on Almeida Makhachev. I don't think I'm going to have any more pre-fight bets for this card. You never know. Might add some over-unders, might add some props. As I make these breakdown videos, we'll take a look at the odds. But so far, this is all I've got for this week. And hopefully then we can make some money in live betting, because we did very, very well in live betting on that card that was headlined by who actually headlined the card? I can't remember. Derek Lewis, Rodrigo Nascimento. So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about Jailton Almeida in a little bit, but I think you can throw Makhachev in with him just to sweeten the odds on betting Almeida a little, just because I would be truly amazed if Islam Makhachev were to lose this fight. And if you guys have been watching my videos for a long time, you will know that I very, 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 very rarely bet guys in the kind of odds range that Makhachev is in. I'll only ever bet on guys in Makhachev's odds range if I think they have virtually no way to lose and they have virtually no weaknesses in their skill set. And I think those two factors are pretty true with Mr. Makhachev. So I don't mind throwing him in on a Jailton Almeida parlay accumulator just to sweeten the odds a little bit. So, Dustin Poirier, 35 years old, 5'9", with a 73-inch reach. And we can see that Islam Makhachev, 32 years old, 5'10", with a 70.5-inch reach. So, on paper, not a massive difference in age. But Poirier is obviously in the tail end of his career. He's had almost 40 pro fights. He's been in a lot of wars. He's taken a lot of damage. And I do think he's declining from fight to fight. Don't get me wrong. He just, he's had a couple of amazing wins in the last few years against Michael Chandler and Benoit Saint-Denis. But I think Makhachev is several levels above these guys. And I think Father Time is really starting to take its toll on Poirier. With how amazing he's been throughout his career, how many wars he's been in, all the entertaining fights he's been in. I just think when you get into this, 40 fight range, there's just no way to avoid Father Time. Whereas Makhachev, he's had a lot of fights, 26, but hasn't been in the kind of wars, hasn't taken as much damage as Poirier, nowhere near. Apart from the Volkanovski fight, we've never really seen Makhachev in much trouble. I know the Tarukian fight was quite competitive, but obviously it was all grappling. It's not like Makhachev was getting beaten up, taking loads of damage in that fight. So sure, Makhachev trains very hard. Perhaps he takes damage in the gym, but hasn't really shown any signs of being chinny, apart from that knockout against Adriano Martins years ago. But outside of that, rock solid, good cardio, reasonably skilled, good fight IQ, reasonably skilled everywhere, good fight IQ, smart guy, in my opinion, the best lightweight on the planet by some considerable margin. So in terms of the size difference between these two, Poirier is on the smaller side for a lightweight at 5'9", with a 73-inch reach, which is why Poirier did flirt with the featherweight division for a little while. Makhachev about the same size, 5'10", with a 70.5-inch reach, but he is quite a physically imposing lightweight, which is why his grappling control is so strong. So you guys know me, most of you watch my videos every single week. You know it's not like me to ever recommend a bet on a guy like Makhachev. So why am I betting Makhachev this week? The reason why I'm betting on Makhachev is because I think Poirier's only chances of winning this fight are by disqualification if something crazy happens, like Makhachev throws an illegal strike or something like that. If Makhachev gets injured in the fight, maybe, you know, Conor McGregor style, throws a low kick and breaks his leg, something like that, breaks his hand, that could happen. The third way I think Makhachev can lose is if Dustin Poirier KOs him dead, flatlines him, which can of course happen. It's a cage fight to the death. Anyone can be knocked out in any fight, and Dustin Poirier is a very dangerous striker, does have big power in his hands. However, notice the way I worded that way in which Makhachev could lose, where I said Poirier would have to knock him out cold. The reason why I think Poirier would have to proper KO Makhachev dead, like out, sent to the Shadow Realm, is because if Poirier were to just hurt Makhachev on the feet or knock him down or something like that, if Poirier doesn't get the finish, like immediately, as soon as Makhachev grabs a hold of Poirier, I think he's going to be able to take Poirier down and recover basically with his grappling control. Because Poirier is one of these guys who is very easy to take down, very, very weak off his back. And so I think this is one of those matchups where I don't think it's going to be enough for Poirier to catch Makhachev with a big shot on the feet and hurt him and wobble him or maybe drop him. I think he's going to have to properly put Makhachev away, properly knock him out. Because as soon as Makhachev gets close to him, grabs a hold of him, just going to take him down, put him on his back. I could be wrong, but that is why I like Makhachev in this fight, just because Poirier's path to victory is so narrow. So the way I see this fight from a betting perspective is the fight stays standing. You know, it could be pretty even. Poirier's a good boxer. He's got good power in his hands. Makhachev moves well on the feet. He's a decent striker as well. But I think we all know the smart path to victory, the smart thing for Makhachev to do would be to get this fight to the ground where he has a huge edge. And like I say, Poirier, his takedown offense is bad. He's weak off his back. He slows a lot when you make him grapple as well. He gasses pretty bad if you make him grapple. And so as soon as Makhachev gets him to the ground, which I don't think is going to be particularly difficult to do, I just think it'll be utter domination. And we know Makhachev's got the cardio to grapple hard for 5 rounds, no problem. Yes, he slowed a bit against Volkanovski, but Volkanovski made him work way harder for takedowns and made him scramble way harder and exert way more energy on the ground to maintain grappling control than Poirier is going to be able to. So I don't see Makhachev slowing in this fight. I think he's got far better cardio than Poirier. So I really like Makhachev in this fight. That's why I'm happy to have him as the first leg of a parlay. Accumulator, depending on what part of the world you live in. Accumulator in Europe, parlay in America. So yeah, Makhachev first leg. And we'll talk about Almeida in a little bit. So if we take a look at the over-under on this one, the fight doesn't go to a decision is also really, really tempting to me. I might actually find a parlay for that as well, you know. Might actually toss that in somewhere just because I would be absolutely amazed if this fight were to go to a decision. So we'll see if there's anything else we can parlay with that. I very rarely bet parlay accumulators, but every once in a while some bets come along and I'm like, you know what? I'd be amazed if that loses. And fight doesn't go to a decision. I mean, I know the odds are steep, but for me, I'd be amazed if this fight went to a decision. Only because Poirier, while he is a very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, he just slows down so much when you force him to grapple. And we know how aggressive Makhachev is on the ground with pursuing a finish. And then there's also the possibility that Poirier could catch Makhachev with a big shot and knock him out. So you cover multiple bases if you bet on fight doesn't go to a decision. In actual fact, that might be a better leg for the parlay than the Makhachev straight. But I do like both, to be fair. So yeah, that's pretty decent. I wouldn't touch the over 1.5 rounds. I do think Makhachev could get this done pretty quickly with how big the skill gap is on the ground. But, my lean is over 1.5 rounds. Gun to my head, I think over 1.5 rounds is more likely to hit than under 1.5 rounds, because I think Makhachev may show Poirier a lot of respect early on, spend a little bit of time striking before going to his wrestling. And that could obviously mean the clock would tick closer to that 7.5 minute mark. So, just going to check something on here. Okay. So, in terms of the prop bets on this fight, let me see. Makhachev. I was just looking at whether Makhachev prefers submissions or stoppages through ground and pound, because I do think it'll reach a point, a bit like Justin Gaethje against Khabib, where Poirier will be too tired to defend himself on the ground. And it seems from Makhachev's record, he does have the odd win by ground and pound, to be fair, but it seems like he does prefer submission wins. The odds on Makhachev to win by knockout or TKO, which would obviously cover the win by ground and pound, that's not the best. Makhachev by submission, pretty steep. You know what, if you really want a better prop on this to make watching it more interesting, I would go Makhachev by knockout or TKO at odds of around 4.0 plus 300, just on the basis that Makhachev may get a stoppage with ground and pound, which would be classed as a TKO win, but I don't love it. I think the odds are a bit short, and it's not the kind of bet I would place personally. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is probably the most interesting fight on this entire card, and it's going to be Paulo Costa versus Sean Strickland. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that Strickland is the favourite at average odds of around 1.42, which is going to be minus 238 for an implied probability of 70%. If we take a look at the odds on Costa, he's going to be around an average of 2.90, which is going to be plus 190 for an implied probability of 34%. So Costa is 33 years old, 6'1", with a 72-inch reach, and Strickland is 33 years old, 6'1", with a 76-inch reach. So as ever, Costa has a bad case of T-Rex arms, giving up a 4-inch reach advantage to Strickland, which is a bit of an issue because Strickland knows how to use his reach, knows how to use his length. He does fight long, and of course Costa, has a bad case of T-Rex arms, but he's giving up a reach disadvantage to everyone. So it's not like it's anything new to Costa. He's probably given up this kind of reach to everyone in the division at this point, and it's an issue for him in all of his fights. So how do we see this fight from a betting point of view? Well, initially I was thinking Costa had a really good chance of winning this fight because of how aggressive he is, how hard he hits, and how passive Sean Strickland can be. My logic being, I don't rate Du Plessis very highly. I think he's a very sloppy, relatively low-level striker in the division. He's just a bit of a tank. He's got abnormal power for the division and a really strong will to win. But I think Costa is a bit of a tank. He's got a lot of power, but I think he's far more technical than Du Plessis. So I was starting to think about Costa as an underdog pick here because, say we want about Du Plessis being relatively low level from a technical point of view, he still outstruck Sean Strickland in that fight, which means there's no reason why with Costa being the more technical striker than Du Plessis, he can't even, he can't do even better than Du Plessis. My issue with betting Costa in this matchup is that it's actually a 5-rounder, which I didn't realise until after I'd researched this fight actually, because, well, it makes no sense why it would be a 5-rounder, right? It's not a title fight, an interim title fight or anything like that, so I just assumed this would be a 3-round fight. But according to Tapology, it's actually 5 rounds, which is obviously a much more difficult fight for Paulo Costa because he tends to slow as fights wear on, whereas Strickland has really good cardio and can go hard for 5 rounds no problem. We've seen him in multiple 5-round fights, whereas Costa always looks quite flat and tired in the 3rd round. He even looked quite flat and tired against Luke Rockhold in a fight that he totally controlled, and obviously Rockhold is a lot younger than Sean Strickland. So if this were a 3-rounder, be a lot more optimistic about Costa's chances of winning. But with it being a 5-rounder, I don't have a whole lot of faith in him, if I'm honest. I think it's going to be really difficult for him to take that 4th and 5th round against Strickland, and then Strickland's only got to win one of the 1st, 2nd or 3rd to put himself in a position to win a decision here. So if you think about how these two guys match up from a stylistic point of view, I'd be amazed if this fight went to the ground. You know, neither guy hardly ever tries to take their opponents down, and both guys are pretty difficult to take down and hold down. So if either of them were to use some grappling in this fight, I doubt they'd have much success with it anyway. So this is probably going to be a stand-up fight. The range in which, you know what, I'm not actually sure what range this fight is going to take place in, because Costa is obviously a pressure fighter. He likes to be the aggressor. He likes to take control of the centre of the octagon, put his opponents on the back foot, walk them down, put a lot of pressure on them. But that's kind of what Strickland likes to do as well. And so it's not easy to back Costa up, because when he comes forward, he is a tank, he is powerful, he does hit very hard, he comes forward with reckless abandon, but Strickland isn't a counter striker. I can't imagine he's going to be a counter striker in this either, so I don't know who's going to lead the dance here. I'm guessing it's going to be Costa, at least early on, because with how aggressive he is, how powerful he is, how much more powerful he is than Strickland, it's going to be hard for Strickland to back Costa up. But we don't really see Strickland on the back foot very often. Duplessis kind of put him on the back foot in the second half of their fight, but we've even seen Strickland lead the dance. I mean, Strickland's led the dance against almost everyone, so yeah, Strickland likes to lead the man dance, but so does Costa, so I'm not sure what dynamic we're going to see on the feet here. So in terms of how they match up stylistically, Costa obviously lands mean, nasty, hard, impactful shots. His biggest weapons are his kicks. He's got devastating body kicks, devastating leg kicks. Strickland's obviously got that great jab, that great head movement, a really good striking defense. He does a good job of measuring distance, using his length to chip away at his opponents and evade strikes. So early on, I think Strickland will struggle. I think he'll struggle to deal with the power and the physicality of Costa, but I think the longer the fight goes, the more we'll see momentum swing in Strickland's favour. Having said that, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens if Costa can't push Strickland on the back foot. It'll be interesting. It's a very interesting fight. In my opinion, the best fight on the card. It's like the people's main event, which is probably why it is a 5-rounder. I think this is a great matchup and a really good stylistic matchup. Really entertaining fight. So Strickland's more likely to win, but his odds are kind of terrible. And how often have we seen Strickland underperform, not really show up and fight to his full potential? For that reason, gun to my head, if I absolutely had to bet this fight, I would take Costa. But for me, I wouldn't bet Costa. If it were a 3-rounder, I think he'd have a better chance of winning, but the probability of him beating Strickland in a 5-rounder isn't good. So in terms of the over-under on this one, we can see a set at over 2.5 rounds. I actually think it's pretty likely that hits. Both guys are kind of decisionators. If you look at Strickland's record, he frequently goes to a decision. And then if you look at Costa's record, even though he's branded as like this big powerful striker, and I've obviously been calling him big and powerful as well, you can see that he frequently goes to a decision as well. So it's one of those things where quite likely the over 2.5 rounds hits. I don't love the odds, but I would imagine that one would hit. In terms of the props, Strickland by decision, most likely outcome. I would agree with that, because Strickland doesn't really have the killer instinct to take Costa out if Costa starts to get tired. And Costa's a tough fucker. We've seen him in some wars. It's not easy to put him away. So yeah, I think this is quite likely to go to a decision. So Strickland by decision, most likely outcome. But again, the odds are terrible, so I wouldn't bet that. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Kevin Holland versus Oleksiejczuk. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Holland is a pretty big favourite at average odds of around 1.38, which is going to be minus 263 for an implied probability of 72%. If we take a look at the odds on Oleksiejczuk, he's around an average of 3.10, which is going to be plus 210 for an implied probability of 32%. So Holland is 31 years old, 6'3" with an 81-inch reach. Oleksiejczuk, 29 years old, 6 foot tall with a 74-inch reach. And Holland is moving back up to middleweight for this fight, which I think is a great move because for me, he didn't really look very good at welterweight, didn't look particularly healthy. We've spoken about this in the past. He kind of lost all his power and pop in his shots at welterweight and looked quite skinny and lean and kind of frail and fragile at times. So I like this move back up to middleweight for Holland. I think he can do a lot better at middleweight where he's more filled out and will have more pop in his shots, more impactfulness on his strikes. I think this move back to middleweight will really benefit Holland. So Holland's got a 7-inch reach advantage over Oleksiejczuk, which is very nice because this is most likely going to be a stand-up fight. Now what's interesting about these two is they both have really bad takedown defense and they're both very, very weak off their back. The difference between these two on the ground is that Oleksiejczuk is a very low-level grappler, whereas even though Holland has bad takedown defense and he's weak off his back, as we've seen in his fights against like Jacare, for example, and also Michael Chiesa, he does have some pretty nasty submissions. He's pretty slick on the ground. He's just too weak off his back for me. So I doubt this fight will go to the ground because neither guy really ever tries to take their opponents down, although Holland tried pretty hard to take MVP down, but I think that was more to do with the fact that he was struggling so bad on the feet. I don't think that's going to be the case here with Oleksiejczuk. So I don't think this fight's going to go to the ground. If it does, to be fair, both guys could cause the other problems on the ground because of how weak both of them are on the ground. Like, it doesn't matter that Holland's got the better ground game than Oleksiejczuk. Ultimately, Holland is so weak off his back that if Oleksiejczuk does get on top of him, he probably will be able to rack up a lot of top control. But make no mistake, Holland's ground game's a lot better. But, you know, I don't see this fight being decided on the ground. And if it is, Holland's probably submitted Oleksiejczuk. So, very likely this will be a stand-up fight. If the fight stays standing, it's actually a really, really good matchup, really good clash of styles because they're both pretty good boxers. I would actually say Oleksiejczuk is the better boxer. You know, he throws a high volume of strikes, he's aggressive, and overall his boxing's pretty good, to be fair. Holland is the much more diverse striker though. He's got better footwork, better movement. He's definitely better defensively. He's definitely better, more durable. He's got a better kicking game. Just throws a more diverse range of strikes. And so I do think Holland will win this fight. I do think ultimately he will end up getting the job done on the feet and outstriking Oleksiejczuk. I think predominantly because Oleksiejczuk's striking defense is quite bad and he's a little bit chinny. I think at some point Holland probably finds his chin, gets him out of there. And I think Oleksiejczuk could struggle to deal with the footwork and the movement, the elusiveness as the fight progresses and Oleksiejczuk starts to get more tired. But I will say this, even though you know Holland's the better striker and he's a big favourite here, this is one of those fights where I do think if I look at all the matchups this weekend, obviously we've got a lot of big favourites on this card. What I would say is that I do feel Oleksiejczuk is one of the underdogs that's most likely to cause an upset. And I understand the wiki cappers will be rushing to the comment section to call me a clueless idiot for saying that because they'll be like, oh, this guy sucks, he's lost to fucking some bums like Jacoby, Jimmy Crute, blah blah blah, and Kevin Holland's this hyped up amazing fighter. Yeah, I get it, but styles make fights ultimately, and I just think in a stand-up fight the skill gap between Holland and Oleksiejczuk isn't massive so long as Oleksiejczuk doesn't gas or doesn't get himself knocked out. Skill for skill, if both these guys just stand and strike for 3 rounds, I think it'll actually be pretty close because we saw Holland struggle very bad against Jack Della Maddalena, and while Oleksiejczuk's obviously nowhere near as good as Maddalena, he does kind of have the same style, heavy pressure, boxing based style of fighting, likes to pressure you, put you on the back foot, and while he's not as good as Maddalena, he is a lot bigger than Maddalena. So, you know, I think that Maddalena-Holland fight is a blueprint for the fact that this matchup could potentially be a little bit difficult for Holland. So for that reason, I would not bet Holland here as a big favourite. You know, his odds carry an implied probability of 72%. I wouldn't go near that. But because Holland is the better striker, it's likely to be a stand-up fight. Oleksiejczuk does get dinged a lot and rocked and wobbled a lot. you know, I wouldn't be touching Oleksiejczuk in this fight. For me, it's an easy pass. In terms of the over-under on this one, the over 1.5 rounds is kind of interesting to me. I am very tempted to bet it. I haven't made my mind up on what I'm going to do with it yet. I'll obviously post in Telegram, Discord if I end up pulling the trigger, and obviously post the bet to my website as well. But yeah, the thing that makes me reluctant to bet over 1.5 rounds is obviously Oleksiejczuk is very aggressive and he's going to be initiating exchanges with Holland. So these guys will exchange early, which means, you know, Oleksiejczuk will be at risk of getting knocked out. Having said that, I don't feel Holland is a massive finisher. You know, he frequently goes deep in fights. He's been to a decision in his last 2, although granted, Michael Page and Jack Della Maddalena are extremely durable. And then went deep against Ponzinibbio, deep against Thompson. Yeah, you know what? I don't love the over 1.5 rounds, but I don't see Oleksiejczuk finishing Holland because of how tough and durable Holland is. Holland's not like a crazy dangerous finisher, so even though Oleksiejczuk is a little chinny and not the best defensively, I think if a stoppage does come, is more likely deeper in the fight. I'm not going to bet this because I think it is like a proper gamble, because both guys are likely to go to war, and Oleksiejczuk could easily get knocked out early. But my lean would be on the over 1.5 rounds. In terms of the prop bets on this fight, Holland knockout TKO 3.60 plus 260. Holland by decision, a little bit better. You know, sometimes where I feel about props is, oh, Holland by submission's terrible. I thought the Holland by submission might be like 10.0 or something juicy. It's not. Yeah, you know what? There's a lot of ways Holland could get it done here, and the odds aren't great on by decision, submission, knockout, TKO, and I think all those are possible. So yeah, I would give the props a miss on that. There's nothing I really like there. So now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be Alexander Romanov and the second leg of our parlay accumulator on this card, which is going to be Jailton Almeida. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one. Now obviously we bet this parlay accumulator last week, before the odds have declined on Mr. Almeida. I think he was about 1.40 when we bet him. Was he about 1.40? I don't know, I can't remember. Anyway, I know he was a little bit better than the average odds we've got at the moment, which is 1.36. And that is going to be minus 278 for an implied probability of 74%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Romanov, he's around an average of 3.10, which is going to be plus 210 for an implied probability of 32%. Now, it's not very often that I think there's value on a fighter in this odds range. But every once in a while, I do think a betting opportunity pops up where the betting markets, the betting public have overreacted to one fight, which has kind of skewed the odds and given us a little bit extra value in the odds than what there should be. Because if Jailton Almeida had not lost to Curtis Blades in his last fight, I think he probably would have been like a 1.10 minus 1,000 favourite over Mr. Alexander Romanov. And to be fair, nothing's really changed, right? Nothing's really changed from that loss to Curtis Blades. He got caught in a bad position up against the cage and knocked out. He was doing pretty fucking good against the best grappler in the division, Curtis Blades, up until that point, and has looked great in every other UFC fight, whereas Romanov's looked absolutely terrible. So here we've got a fighter that would probably be a 1.10 minus 1,000 favourite had he not kind of just got caught in a bad position against Curtis Blades. But now because of that fight, people are like, oh, fraud check, this guy's a bum, this guy's a fraud, this guy's overhyped, blah, 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 blah. Therefore, there's extra value in his odds against a guy like Romanov, who like truly is pretty low level, like nowhere near Jailton Almeida's level, in my opinion. So I know he's a big favourite, I know he's a heavyweight. But when you parlay him with Makhachev, you get pretty good odds for two fighters that I think win a really, 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 really high percentage of the time. If we look on Discord, can't remember what odds we got the parlay at when we bet it last week. Just take a quick look. Let's take a quick look. 1.65, which would be minus 154 for an implied probability of 61%. Yeah, I think there's value there, guys. I think there's value. Even though Makhachev, Almeida, big favourites, I still think there's value. So let's get into the reason why I like Almeida a lot in this fight. So Romanov is 33 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. Almeida, 32 years old, 6'3" with a 79-inch reach. That is a nice 4-inch reach advantage for Almeida. Everything else virtually identical. So the reason why I like Almeida a lot in this fight is because both these guys are primarily grapplers. Neither of them are too dangerous on the feet, which makes a flash knockout not all that likely. And if these two get into a grappling match, I just think that Almeida is levels and levels and levels and levels and levels and levels and levels above Romanov. I understand that on paper he lost against Curtis Blades. Now, people are very results orientated in this business, but when you go back and watch that fight, Almeida was doing pretty good in that fight. He just got caught in a bad position and finished up against the cage when he committed to a takedown for too long, didn't realise how much danger he was in. Probably a lack of experience. He will learn from it. But I consider Curtis Blades to be the best grappler in the heavyweight division. It's between him and John Jones, right? And yet, Jailton Almeida was dominating him in grappling positions in round one. So perhaps Almeida is the second best grappler in the heavyweight division after John Jones. I mean, if you look at the first round against Curtis Blades, you certainly think so. So I consider Blades to be in a different universe to Alexander Romanov when it comes to MMA grappling, and yet Almeida was handling Curtis Blades pretty comfortably. So the thing with Alexander Romanov is he is a good offensive wrestler, he is a good MMA grappler, he is a big, strong, physically imposing guy, but the problem with Alexander Romanov is that he's one of these fighters that is just a little bit cursed, because the more he grapples, the more tired he gets. So if he grapples hard, he gets tired very, very quickly. And because these guys are both grapplers, you'd anticipate there's going to be a lot of grappling in this fight. Now, Jailton Almeida has shown us, with the energy that he's exerted in his fight against Derek Lewis, that for a heavyweight, his cardio is pretty damn amazing. Romanov has shown us in his past fights that even though his cardio is improving a bit, that's mainly due to adjustments in his pacing, where he spends more time striking now and doesn't commit as hard to his grappling as he did in his early fights. In his early fights in the UFC, he used to commit really hard to his grappling early, burn himself out and gas. His cardio's looked better in recent fights, but that's because he's not committing as hard to his grappling now. But what that means is when a guy like Almeida forces him to grapple and forces him to commit to his grappling, Romanov's cardio is likely to just look how it did in the past, where he slows very quickly. And so if these two get into a grappling match, Romanov may have a bit of success early on. Almeida's looked weak off his back on the Contender Series and stuff like that. But the problem is, Romanov grapples early and has success with grappling early. I think it's going to cost him big time in the second and third round when he gasses real bad. And Almeida won't gas. Almeida's cardio is very, very good. So this is one of those fights where both guys are grapplers. We're likely to see a lot of grappling in the fight. And in my opinion, Almeida's a significantly better grappler, better cardio, all that kind of stuff. On the feet, I think Almeida's the better striker as well. Romanov is quite sloppy, quite clunky on the feet. Almeida moves very well. He's pretty technical. Obviously, he likes to get the job done on the ground, but he's a far more technical striker than Romanov. Now, obviously, in the heavyweight division, flash KOs are a big thing. All these big guys have got big power, right? But the thing about Romanov is he doesn't really have knockout power, or at least we haven't seen it. If you look on his record, he frequently goes to a decision, and all of his wins inside the distance, for the most part, have been on the ground. Obviously, he's got some wins by knockout earlier in his career against a much lower level of opponent, but in the UFC, his finishes for the most part have come on the ground, and it is not going to be easy to finish Almeida on the ground, because Almeida is an extremely good grappler. So I like Almeida a lot in this fight. I think the betting market have overreacted to that Curtis Blades loss. If it wasn't for that Blades loss, I think he'd be like a 1.10 minus 1,000 favourite. So even though he is a big favourite, I still think there's value there. I'd be really surprised if Romanov wins this on the weekend. So hope you found that useful. We'll now take a look at the over-under. I wouldn't touch the over-under on this fight personally. just because we know Almeida is aggressive, and I do think the skill gap is so big on the ground when I see what Almeida did to Curtis Blades, that if he does get Romanov down, put him in a bad position, I could easily see him getting a finish. So I wouldn't touch the over. The under is also a tricky one as well, because with both guys being, pretty good grapplers, Almeida or Romanov may not be at risk of being finished until the second half of the fight, when he maybe becomes too tired to defend himself. So for that reason, I wouldn't touch the over or the under on this. I would just pass. In terms of the props, how does Almeida like to get it done on the ground? Let's see, ground and pound, rear naked chokes. So he prefers the submission. The odds on that are terrible. Knockout or TKO, a little bit better. I wouldn't bet either of those myself, but if you want to sprinkle a little bit of money on this fight to make watching him more interesting, I guess go with Almeida to win by knockout or TKO, on the basis that if he does get a win via ground and pound, the win by knockout or TKO prop would cover that. But I don't love it. I think the odds are pretty crap, if I'm honest. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down this next fight, which is going to be Randy Brown versus Zaleski dos Santos. Or they cut the dos Santos thing out of his name. Anyway, Mr. Capoeira himself, Mr. Zaleski, is taking on Brown this weekend. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that, where are the odds? Here they are. Mr. Randy Brown is a 1.56 favourite, which is going to be minus 179 for an implied probability of 64%. If we take a look at the odds on Mr. Zaleski dos Santos, his full name is here, we can see he is around an average of 2.45, which is going to be plus 145 for an implied probability of 41%. So Brown is 33 years old, 6'3", with a 78-inch reach. Zaleski, 37 years old, 5'11", with a 73-inch reach. So a couple of pretty big X factors here. The first being Zaleski is 4 years older than Brown. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but these guys are at the stage in their career where that 4-year age gap is quite significant, simply because Randy Brown at 33, 34 years old, he's in his prime for a welterweight, so he's still going to be improving, or at the very least not declining. Whereas Zaleski is going to be 38 years old later on this year. That is very old for a welterweight. That is the stage of a welterweight's career where you'd expect them to start to decline significantly from fight to fight. So that 4-year age gap with the stages of their careers they're in favours Brown in quite a big way. And there's also a nice height and reach advantage for Brown. This would be one of those fights that I would definitely keep an eye on the ceremonial weigh-ins for, because I do think this could be one of those matchups where the size difference is absolutely comedic, because we know Randy Brown is long, abnormally tall for the division, he's huge, and Zaleski has got that smaller, more compact, more muscular frame. So Randy Brown's size advantage might look huge here, even if it doesn't necessarily look huge on paper. I think in the flesh it could be. So in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, this is one of the more interesting fights on the card. I don't see there being much grappling in this fight. Neither guy tries to take their opponents down that often. They're both primarily strikers. They've both got a bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but for the most part, they both like to stand and strike. So it's probably going to be a stand-up fight. And both guys, where we were talking about the Strickland versus Costa fight being a little bit tricky to call, because we don't know what range the fight is going to take place in, because both guys like to be the aggressor and lead the man dance. When it comes to Zaleski and Brown, they're kind of going to get what they want here, because Randy Brown likes to stay on the outside, circle away from his opponents, and use his length to chip away at them from a safe distance with a counter-striking style. And Zaleski likes to be that aggressor, the one that comes forward, leads the dance, puts a lot of pressure on his opponents, and take control of the centre of the octagon. So they're both going to get what they want in this fight. And I don't really have a strong lean either way on this one. Randy Brown's the favourite. He's got the reach advantage, the length. He's younger than Zaleski at the critical point in both guys' careers. However, stylistically, I think this one could be very close and competitive, because Randy Brown is going to be circling on the outside, chipping away at Zaleski with those jabs, those leg kicks. Zaleski's going to be trying to walk him down, load up on those big power punches, and punch Brown's head off his shoulders. And the thing is, Zaleski does hit pretty hard, and Brown is a little chinny. It's not going to be easy for Zaleski to get inside on Brown because Brown's movement, his footwork is great. He uses his length really well. But Zaleski's pretty good at fighting his way inside. He's very aggressive. He's got good cardio. Both guys have. And, you know, Zaleski's probably going to be landing the harder, more impactful, more damaging shots just because he's a more powerful guy. So this fight could be razor close where Brown's got the volume on the outside of the jabs and leg kicks, but perhaps Zaleski's having the bigger moments with the power punches. Don't really lean too strongly either way here. Gun to my head, I guess Brown's more likely to win, but, you know, I would not bet this fight personally. I think it could go either way. So in terms of the over-under on this one, bookies very much feel this is going to go to a decision. If we look at Brown's record, he does frequently go to a decision. If we look at Zaleski's record, definitely a decisionator. His last 5 fights have gone to a decision, which is quite surprising actually with how aggressive he is and how hard he hits. I mean, look what he did to Benoit Saint-Denis, right? But that's a little bit surprising. Even money odds range for fight to go or not to go to a decision. I guess the fight's more likely to go to a decision because Zaleski's last 5 have gone to a decision. He's a tough fucker. If anyone was going to be finished in this fight, I think it's more likely to be Randy Brown because Zaleski's very durable. And since Zaleski's gone to a decision in his last 5, I guess it's more likely this one goes to a decision. But again, I don't have a super strong feeling on it. Most likely outcome, probably Brown by decision. The odds are terrible though. Yeah, I don't love any of the props on that fight. I would give him a miss. Actually, maybe was, yeah, Zaleski by knockout TKO was not great. Yeah, that's a bit of a dead fight on the prop front. So, hope you found that useful. If you did and you like these breakdown videos, don't forget to check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. Link in the description below, where you'll find all my breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card. If you join us, you can check them out. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. Take care. Have a great weekend. I hope you crush it. I hope you do great. I hope you make loads of money. And I will see you in next week's video. Nice one, guys. Take care. Bye.